or the future where that work actually gets outsourced to agents, and there's these very critical moments where a human expert is needed. And that's actually the interesting work, and the discerning work that happens. So I think that's another interesting thought experiment for people to think about. But then ultimately what I always come back to is, yes, it's very compelling what you're saying, but the reality is most technology right now is assistive. And that's the category that's being established for the past. Actually, if we look back 2025, we talked a lot about the agentic paradigm. We talked a lot about these reasoning models and what's possible now. And yes, we are seeing this in our own customers and how that's very much changing the way they operate. But if I look more broadly at the landscape, we're seeing primarily assistive technology being rolled out. What do you make of that?
I think if we look back to 2023 for assistive technology, that's roughly what 2025 has been for agentic technology. Maybe even the end of 2025 is the equivalent of the start of 2023, where in 2023 it was eminently possible to build a RAG tool and to build a thin wrapper that enabled lawyers to query ChatGPT, essentially, with a nice system prompt that's so long, and to get a nicely tailored response. Now, it was eminently possible, and we did it. We built a RAG-based tool that had some legal competency and everything else fairly quickly in 2023. But it takes a lot of time for the market to mature enough, and for behaviors to mature sufficiently, and for those models to get good enough that they're working within themselves. Because what you don't want is a model to be working at its capacity. If a model is working on problems that are absolutely at its limit, you're going to get hallucinations, you're going to get some inaccuracies, and you're going to have a system you can't fully trust, and then you go back to the assistive paradigm. So roughly through 2023, I think we saw a lot of experimentation, and the kind of 80% get built, and a lot of kind of education happening in 2023 and first half of 2024 around assistive technologies. And then that laid the foundation for new vendors who had observed that to come in and move very quickly. In some cases, we also saw people like Legora do the education process. Harvey as well, I think, actually educate the market and actually drive them towards adopting these tools. So they laid the foundation that enabled them to then accelerate like crazy, which we've seen in the last 12 months. With agentic products, in the agentic paradigm, we're at a similar spot. And you talk to yourself about how there is not necessarily so much trust that you would just deploy a fully autonomous agent to the business and let it do whatever. And useful context to understand where we're at is that an agent today can email, it can use the browser, that computer use is a thing, it can use your computer, it can access many different tools and knowledge bases, whether it's via MCP or via custom integrations or whatever you do via computer use. It can do loads and loads and loads of stuff, but we don't see it doing loads and loads and loads of stuff. It's because buyers aren't crazy and vendors aren't crazy. People do not want to deploy technology that they cannot really trust, that isn't proven at significant scale, and that doesn't have the right safeguards built around it. So in December 2025, which is when we're recording, rolling out agents is much less around doing something wacky and being an early adopter and trying to see what an agent can do and watch it go wild. And it's much more about using agentic technology to enable this previously assistive technology to do the same kind of simple, limited, well-guardrailed scope directly for the business. And as a vendor, as builders, what we think about is not how do we make an agent do the craziest stuff. We think about how do we make an agent take a simple, high volume, relatively low risk task that we can be 100% confident in as a vendor to roll out for one of our customers.